So you can see my screen. I've got the book open. I've got the slides on one side. So let me just organize it a little bit better. I'll use both the book and the slides, more so that, while I'm explaining things, you can also read some of the details, and you may just come up with few questions because of it. So that's why I've opened it, and I'll run both of these. So I'm starting with page 331. Basically, it's chapter 24, which is considered to be most important for the second part of the module 2, from the examiner's perspective, that is. So in the traditional research methods, we've got two areas which may sound slightly more complicated than others. One of them is data collection methods and sampling methods. Because in research work, we do need to identify the type of data, which is either numeric or non-numeric. And based on the nature of that sort of collection of information, we will have to identify the methodology we adopt to do our analysis or analytics. For the other part, which is to identify the sample out of the population, which is, the whole of the target market, let's say, or your object of your research. You need to extract a sample that you can work on, because there could be a huge number that is part of the population, and you can't get to all of that to come up with the or to collect information from the entire population. So you need to do sampling. And sampling has to have some rationale. Now, that rationale is actually talking about the methods of how you would obtain the sample. So that's where we are going to get to. But start with the type of data. And by the way, in the previous lecture, which was slightly short than usual, I was talking about how the proposal that is sent to the client is structured, so that you can look at what is typically required in your proposal to be a pattern or a standard that anybody who is a professional researcher or even research analyst, they would have to follow that pattern. And pattern being that you are uh, identifying the methods of how you're going to collect the information, what would be the sourcing based on either, you know, going after the primary source or the secondary source of data. And then how do you intend to do your analysis, or what is required as far as, presentation of that information and so on. So that was the reason. But we did whatever we could with the time that we spent on it. There is a next half of that that we will cover later, because ideally what we did the last time was the module 3, which was research in business and business of research. So obviously we're going to get back to it, and then we'll finish the other half. So just keep that aside for now, and let's start with something fresh like data. What is the different types of data, and what are the different methods of collecting that data? So I'm going to just adjust the temperature here and get going. I will start with the chart, which I think I introduced you to, the one that has the data tables. Okay, now this one is describing the type of data, and methods of data collection. So let's suppose we start with this, which we call data. Data is a piece of information. A data is singular and a plural. So ideally, data means anything that is information, whether it is numerically expressed or non-numerically expressed, it is data and it's information. So I don't think that there is a need for a definition to be learned. We all know what data is. So what we do with the data is that we follow this chart to identify or to relate this with how the data can be divided into types and what could be the methods of data collection. For example, these numbers like 1, 2, 3, and then with the 1, you've got 1.1, 1.2. So they are kind of arranged in that sequence with the numbering so that you can stay on track to know what could be the branching out from the main number. Let's say number 1 is talking about data types. So we are going to split that into quantitative and qualitative data. Okay. So we will learn in this area what are these two types. And within qualitative data, you will look at what could be the different ways in which we identify the data types that relate to qualitative data collection, or it is the data which is to be differentiated within the classification of qualitative data into, say, binary data, nominal, ordinal, interval data, and ratio data. Uh, Mind you, in any case, with what we include in the course that you have taken is introduction to some of the concepts that would allow you to follow a path to finding or discovering perhaps more detailed information within the layers which are identified as main headings and which are branching into, the subsets of the main heading, so that if you feel that you need to learn more, um, then you can perhaps find more resources. But because of the limitation of the time and the scope of what we'd like to cover in this course, we would only look at it as not conclusive of everything, but at least it is a path to where you can do further discoveries. But at the same time, we are mindful also that we introduce the basic concepts or enough concepts that could make you or appear as a professional researcher and you have understanding of these terminologies. Now, since we are following these arrows, starting from this word data here, we've moved on the left. We we are going to talk about data types. On the right hand side, we will talk about the different data collection methods. Like there is a method or there is an organization to how you're going to collect those data, specifically the ones or the methods that you adopt for approaching collection of information from the internet or digital information collection. And of course, number 3 is sampling. Like when you are doing collection of data, you want to, identify the subject um, through sampling techniques that would make it a homogeneous sample. And at times, you need to have more than a few sample tables that would be representative of one set of homogeneity, and the other set could be the opposition or the opposing set of the what is previously considered as a contrast to the first table. And so you can create more tables. So there could be a contrast also. But homogeneity in the sampling technique for the subjects that you identify is important to get a consistent result. That is the data sampling within data collections. And on the left-hand side, if you carry on with the numbers that is followed after number three, there is data analysis. So we will see how some of the fundamental or basic analytic methods are applied, or what are some of the philosophies behind analysis of data, depending on the type of data being either qualitative or quantitative. So that is the idea, and this is just a roadmap, and it is a guiding kind of table of how we are going to continue with the lectures moving forward. Okay, let's see what the table brings. Of course, the first thing, identify your qualitative and quantitative. Qualitative, I've given you the information about what is the differentiator. Qualitative is non-numerical, quantitative is numerical. Examples, we'll get to it very quickly and we'll move quicker than usual on these subjects. Unfortunately, that's where I find myself trapped to finish things on time. And it's coming close to holidays also. Unfortunately, that's a bummer. So, okay, so here let's look at the qualitative examples. Personal observations, of course, a personal observation could lead to any sort of, if you have a bias or preconceived notions about some issues, then, there is this thing about observations where personal observations might require more than one person to be observing a situation or an event. Then there is emotions. Emotions are relative, you know, sentiments, interviews, opinions, reviews, controversies, things like that, which require a very careful um, mm, way of how you're going to collect the information. So, in qualitative data, there is inherent limitations to the how you're going to maintain the integrity or the quality or the non-biasedness of that data. So this is where the qualitative data is slightly challenging to interpret, and not meant some people may not even agree to it. Your client and yourself will have to sit together and come and agree to a strategy. That's important. In quantitative, everything is in black and white. It is actually numeric. So anything that is quantitative, it's easier to interpret, easier to build charts on, easy to put it in, make it into a more elaborate visualization, 3D diagrams, and so on. So, compared to qualitative, quantitative analysis and way of collecting information may not require as much sophistication. If we move to the next slide, we'll talk about the type of quantitative data and type of qualitative data. Now, this is just basic few elements of understanding the different formats of data, which is considered to have an impact on how the calculations eventually in analysis can be affected, or how you would separate certain type or um, um, give a name to a certain type of data. When I'm talking about data in quantitative terms, I'm just talking numbers. So there in numeric sense, in quantitative data, we will broadly divide it into two types. One is what we call continuous data, and the second one is discrete data. So especially if you're running softwares like Tableau, for instance, in doing analysis, I mean, you don't mathematically sit and do the equations. These days, everything is processed through the softwares. So the software requires that I mean, if you start to, as an example, if you start to use Tableau, they will give you, some notes and some maybe videos and things that will educate you further into understanding the requirements of running that software. And then it will start with teaching you the type of data or where it would ask you that to provide information like whether it is coming as a continuous data, is a mix of continuous or discrete data or a discrete data. So there will be drop downs when you do your selections. So these are basic things that even softwares would request that you have this kind of basic knowledge. So first understand continuous data. Continuous data means that it has to be accurate to the last fraction. And the last fraction means that the type of information which can be attributed to an event that collects the quantitative data in terms of milliseconds, nanoseconds, or whatever else that needs to have a mathematical accuracy would be termed as continuous data. I'll just give you an example and you will figure out what I mean. The driver completing the fastest lap of race winning by 1 meters in 12.34 seconds. So it is a binary data, which means it has two variables. One is in meters, which is the distance, and the other one is the seconds or the timer that is required. So it is dichotomous also or binary. By dichotomous means it has two values. It has the distance and then it has the seconds. But when we talk continuous, it means that the data is incomplete unless you have a characteristic to it that makes it appear as accurate as 0.34 seconds um, to the decimal that it represents. And it is also giving you the distance covered. So when you have to translate this or put it in only X and Y tables, just putting the meter and the seconds, that's where the continuous data would be useful. And for the sake of using it in the software, it would ask you to give, first of all, to select how many values you're going to put in. Then you're going to, give the metrics, like how would it be computed, and so on and so forth. So, for your knowledge, up till now, with the basic information you will be examined on in the exams, is to make a distinction between continuous data and discrete data. The question would say that identify these numbers to be corresponding or cross matching with either continuous data type or discrete data type. Um, in the simplest term, it's saying, for example, you can measure the height of your kids as progressively more precise scales, meters, centimeters, so many meters and so many centimeters, and so many millimeters. Okay. So this is continuous. Discrete means it is cannot be identified in fractions. So if you get something which is, let's say, identifying the kids to be 2.5 kids or 1.3 pets, that is not fitting into the type of object or the object for which you're collecting this number. Here, the object is a human being and an animal, a pet, and children. So 2.5 or 1.3 is not going to work. Remember, so this is a note. As a rule, the number counts are considered discrete and the measurement are a form of continuous data. Number of counts. So you can actually have both continuous and a discrete data playing their part in identifying the nature of data that is collected, which is attributed to delivering complete information about something. For instance, here, if someone says measurement are a form of content. So here number counts like 1 meter or one child would be discrete data mixed with continuous data that will talk about the height of a child, say in meters and centimeters. So usually they work hand in hand, but it needs to be identified, separated. And unless it is both of these are identified, you will have problem in analytics because later on you will see that some of the ways in which charts are formed or the graphs are created, if there is an error in identifying both of these together, or identifying both of them in the same set as X to appear in X and Y tables, like X is vertical line and Y, you will not get the correct results. Then we've got, okay, never mind this chart. Let's look at the qualitative data types. Okay, qualitative data can be, for example, and it is best that I explain it with the example. So if it is answers as true or false, yes or no, right or wrong, it is very kind of definitive. Like there is no middle ground. And the binary data is usually more favorable to in polls. And it is a very quick interpretation of the of the qualitative aspect of how the answers are created. So many yeses, so many nos on this issue, and that is easy to convert into or make it into quantitative or translate it in numerical terms. Like one is yes and two is no, or zero means no and one means yes. So you can create those two variables as definitive and easy to interpret or translate into numbers for computation purposes, right? Uh, Now, as an example, if someone went through the jujube box, your candy stuff there, that you call jujubes. It's one of the ones that we get to see quite a bit in stores. Each piece be classified as good or bad. That would be binary data. Usually, good or bad means that, think of it as two colors, or let's say there is two flavors in jujubes. In reality, there are far too many in there, but let's say two flavors. Green you like, red you don't like. Green is not good, red is good, for instance. So good or bad, that can be created, but the uniqueness in there being red and there being green makes it confusing for doing your analytics or identifying them as good or bad, because they are unique. They are unique colors. Green does not have to be bad, but it is identified with being bad. Okay. So, so this is another reason why sometimes binary could give false positive, because you can only say one thing is good or bad, but the flavor themselves, just because you like him or you don't like him, uh, it is a personal choice. But green represents an apple and red represents a strawberry. So for that reason, it wouldn't be as effective in the qualitative research, but right or wrong, true or false is more acceptable. In nominal data is a term we use for the data we also like to call unordered data. Unordered means that um, for example, here, let's just take it as uniqueness. Like I mentioned to you about two flavors, green for apple and red for strawberry. Similarly, if you have a color of eyes, which could be brown, or hair, let's say hair could be brown, could be blonde, could be black, could be rainbow unicorn. With these type of choices, you can't say that brown is good or bad, or brown has, you cannot translate that in numeric terms. Like you can't say you're going to give a value, one for brown, value two for blonde. Basically, it has its own uniqueness and it cannot be considered good or bad, or it would have a uniqueness of its own, which is identified as something which is already there. It's just that you need to see how many are of brown color and how many are blondes. Okay. So you are going to get into some sort of a zone where you will not be identifying brown as good or bad. You can only identify it as, one for female, how many female are brown. So your questionnaire would say, or when you're collecting qualitative data, it would say one two for female, and so many are brown colored, so many are blonde color. So basically, it cannot be something that would say brown is better or brown is greater than blonde or black is more is least available than brown, and therefore black is not preferred. Those kind of decisions you cannot make because it has a quality that cannot be translated into numbers exactly. So questionnaires that you're going to create in the qualitative data when you're collecting, you would be running into things like this, or questions like these ones. What is your nationality, for example? Is it American, German, Kenyan, Japanese, and so on? And these are all unique, and one is not greater or better or less important. So this differentiation you cannot do. And therefore, if the objective of the research is such that you have to identify with something that is you know, racially motivated, you may not be able to use these, or you will not be justified to put them into quantitative terms, come up with a number that would give an opinion about somebody's profile based on their color, hair, religion, or nationality. So this is called unordered data. Okay. Unordered data, when you compare it with, or nominal data, when you compare it with ordered data or ordinal data, you would have the ability to give one thing precedence over another or importance over another, or it is measurable, even though it is qualitative, but it is measurable by making it appear as an example. You could say, how likely are you to recommend our services to your friends? It is actually exhibiting a scale of sorts from 1 to 5, very likely, likely, neutral, unlikely, very unlikely. So all these are sentiments, or, um, you know, and it is all relative to, how one would consider something neutral versus less likely would be a matter of their own personal judgment. So it cannot be a definitive answer, but it gives you a ballpark, or somewhere puts you um, in a place where you can come up with some sort of conclusion if the situation is such, or the question is such, that it cannot be answered exactly. So this is what we call ordinal data or ordered data. Mm. So it has some order to it. That's why they call it ordered, like starting from very likely and ending with the very unlikely. So this is called ordinal data. Mm. All right. Then we've got interval data. Interval data means, um, I'm going to take a 10 minutes break here, and then I'll come back and continue here. So I'll see you in about 10 minutes. Okay, everyone, I'm back. I'd like to continue with the interval data, another type that you will come across in your um, data tables that you will put together. Um, this is called interval data, and it has two ways in which you can consider the interval data to be the one that is most appropriate in certain situations. For example, sometimes the events are such that one set of results or one set of numbers or anything that is um, collecting information about an event is not enough. So you need more of the events or occurrences of something to be collectively put together as um, having the ability to give a better judgment or for the judgment to have a more surety on the performance of something or someone. For example, in the case of Olympics, there are certain events in which you require more than a few or at least more than one occurrences of that event or that performance to be collectively put together so that it can give the opportunity for the judges to make a firm or a conclusive decision. So, as an example, there could be a score of 6.0, 6.5, 7.0, 7.5 in an event. Like it could be a diving event, right? And that's where you need the performer or the athlete to do a number of dives, and each dive would have a number that gives a score or that represents the performance score of that particular single event, single um, I guess occurrence of that performance. And so to collect that data, they would give several numbers like 6.0, 6.5, as it is saying in this example, to give a score to somebody. So that is interval data. That means it is not happening at once, but it is happening in segments, and collectively it is giving a score where individually each score is separated from the other score. That's one example of interval data. Then the other example is finding the differentiator or the number that is a difference between one performance or one number and the next one. So in the second one, you can see 20 degrees centigrade is warmer than 10 degrees. So here the uh, difference between 20 degrees and 10 degrees is 10 degrees, for example. So that difference now brings in three numbers. 20 minus 10 is equal to 10 degrees. So that is the difference. This is also called interval data. So there are these two types of interval data that certainly would require for you to know that these numbers represents the either the collection of numbers or difference between numbers, and that is time sensitive from one event or from one time or from one score or one number to another. So that we call the interval data. Okay. And we don't have to go in the details of how we're going to apply it in the analytics right now. Important is that you understand these different types of what they represent. So that's all that is required of you. So this is okay. And the last one, I believe this one is the last one in qualitative data collection. This is called a ratio data. Ratio means how many times one number is greater or less than the other one. So usually these are just two numbers and not more than two. So it's dichotomous in nature. Ratio is, as you can see, Scoring 40 points has twice the value of scoring 20 points. Okay. So it's going to be 40 and then the colon sign and number 20. What is on the left hand side is considered one value to be measured against what is appearing after the colon on the right hand side. To 40 is to 20. That is the ratio data. Just that when you are separating the data types or you're organizing your data types, you will make it into the planning of how you're going to do your analytics, and you have to separate these different data types because when you are actually in the mode of doing qualitative research, the idea is really to collect information that can come in different flavors or different formats of data. So when you have the plan in place, you would know for what type of questions you would allow for the user to answer it, um, based on how or based on the nature of that that or the objective of your question, and based on whether realistically some answers would require for you to apply the ordinal data versus nominal data as a choice. And whenever you're giving a choice in the questionnaire, you're basically making it into what we call the closed-ended questions. There are two types. There is close-ended and there is open-ended questions. Close-ended has the choice, and you give them parameters, and the answer has to come from those choices only. If it is open-ended question, it is more expressive, something that is got sensitivity, very high sensitivity levels, or for which you intentionally would want to get an answer that could allow you to get sentiments or get an idea of where the express the answers can be expressed in more detail by someone who otherwise wouldn't find a better answer from those multiple choices. So it is more on the descriptive side. Here, when we talk about different data types in qualitative search, we are particularly talking about the close-ended questions. Mixed method approach means that one type of data collection method, for example, in observations or in interviews, we could collect data that would can be quantitative or can be qualitative. So the methodology or the um, type of approach can be mixed method approach. Like one question can be qualitative, the other can be quantitative data. So when you are doing you're conducting your interviews or observations, or say you're doing document studies, you are basically using mixed methods and not necessarily just sticking to qualitative questions only. So that is mixed method. And whenever you are starting your survey design, you're going to create data management plan. It is not part of the, it's not part of the course right now, but if you'd like, you can Google data management plan, and that's where you will see a lot of mention of the types of data and the methods for qualitative and quantitative differentiated. There is something that is provided in the book, which tells you, based on the nature of questions, they could be a mixed method or they could be qualitative or quantitative. And this is where I see it in the book on page 335. It is a good chart to use as a reference. So if it is a questionnaire surveys, the approach can be mixed method because in your surveys there could be different types of questions. If it is interviews, mostly it will be qualitative approach. Mostly, I'm not saying that it is something that is etched on the stone, but interviews normally end up with qualitative questionnaires, and therefore it will collect qualitative data. Documentation reviews qualitative data, usually. That's the approach. Focus groups, we will learn what focus group interviews and all these are, but let's suppose that this is a chart you can refer to. And here you see that it is identifying it with the type of um, analytics you will end up doing. So you will do qualitative here if it is focus group, case study, mixed methods, and so on. In the exam, you will not be asked to differentiate based on these different types of data collection method, whether it is mixed approach or quantitative or qualitative. So that's just for your reference only. Um, what are the data collection methods? Let's also cover that. So far, we learned about the type of data under qualitative and quantitative. Now we look at the data collection method, like how do we obtain the information? Generally speaking, we'd like to classify the information research as observations, as surveys and polls, as interviews, as focus groups, or document studies. Now, observation, and by the way, with all these different methods, you would have to do your own planning to see what could be the most appropriate method that you would like to adopt, given the objective of research and given the sample that is available or not easily obtainable, and based on the um, nature of information you want to collect. If it is something that is very personal or something that has to do with collecting information in a discrete way, um, through observations, you can do that as well. But there is always a legal aspect to how you would use that information. For instance, if it is a social experiment, then the players involved in that, that could be a situation, a facility within which you're doing your observation, that has to be on board. The subjects that are part of that observation will have to be on board. Um, in certain situations, you don't want the observation um, to be, I guess, you want that observation to be discrete without making somebody aware of a situation, so that you can get the actual um, impact of the event or whatever is happening on the ground. You don't want you want some natural reactions to a certain situation. So in that case, you still have to um, do the legal paperwork in order for you to use that. For instance, if a customer walking into, say, a pizza place to buy something, and if the nationality of that person or the, I guess, race of that person is also going to play a role, and you don't want the customer to be aware of that observation that you are doing, you will have to let them know after the event and get a permission to use that observation where that individual or that customer becomes a player, I guess, in that entire observational collection of that. It could be um, either video observation, or it could be something where you are making the notes, but there is a legal aspect to it. And there were times when we were asked to do these kind of things, but we um, thought that, there's a lot of legalities involved, so we just stayed away from it, especially in North America. So observations sometimes have this, unless you're doing something called ethnography, or you are doing what we call longitudinal studies. Um, that is another philosophy or a methodology adopted, which makes the researcher become part of that environment, and basically starts with a basic question or a basic problem, and then you immerse in that environment and you spend more time there to learn more, and your research is driven in the direction which um, changes the original approach, because your ground realities are dictating a direction, or it is giving you a new set of observations within that, because of the duration of time that you are putting in there, and because of you being immersed in that social structure of that research. So, with that time difference and the way in which you are going to design certain type of observations will also impact um, how you're going to do the collection of that information. So that is observation. Observation, you might want to know when is a good time that, or what type of research requires observations. That is something that needs to be examined as a case where certain information cannot be observed, cannot be obtained directly, but can be indirectly attributed to events, on the ground events, and would only be done through observations. When you do observations, there is a certain way in which you're going to collect that info. It's not your personal idea or your personal response as a researcher, or your personal evaluation of how you feel about it that is important. So there is a way in how you're going to collect that information and write notes on it, meaning that there has to be a moderator or a third person or a third eye that is going to validate that. So there is no bias that can be attributed to the observational research. In surveys and polls, it is pretty much like direct, in the sense that it is a primary information, it is directly collected from the subject. In this case, when I'm saying surveys here, I'm talking about human subjects. So in such cases, surveys are more complex. Like, there is a science behind surveys. When you start building questionnaires, you must also be aware of situation or environment, or the of the comfort level of the subject that you have chosen, the consent letters that you need to get signed when you're doing surveys. And it becomes more scientific because a lot of times there is a psychologist involved in creating those surveys as well. So they have to be crafted or to be worded in such a way that it has approach, or it has a way about it that would lead someone from one question to another based on the answer that is provided in the previous question. So it will impact the next question. So if somebody answers yes to, say, question one, then they would be led to say another question that is a choice, which is automatically where the um, question is directing the user to another question, versus the answer that would turn up as yes, and that would lead to another type of question. So it is basically all the time fine tuning itself based on how you have designed it, so that at the very end of finishing up the surveys, your objective of that research is pairing to have some rationale or some sense or some direction based on your previous knowledge about the reactions or supposed reactions to the questions you're going to pose. If there are certain questions that are very personal, you don't want to put it in surveys. You know that you will not get a direct answer, or may be the subject matter is such that some of the some of the people may not be comfortable answering it. So you have to be careful, and you have to draw it in such a way that the wording itself looks very subtle and not as direct, but yet you can drive the surveys in some direction, or at least it will give you some sense of what this person is trying to answer. Okay, so it becomes more tricky. And if you compare it with polls is very simple questions, meaning that there are not too many of the poll questions, maybe two or three, and usually the answer is yes or no, not very complicated. So those are polls, and the difference between surveys and polls is a typical question I see in the exams. And I also know that we have something in the slide that makes it more easy to separate what polls entail and what surveys entail. So this chart is talking about where the surveys and the polls can be differentiated. For example, a survey questionnaire can include several questions across a wide range of question types, such as multiple choice, rating, etc. Polls consist of one multiple choice question where the respondents can select one answer. So these are just two comparisons. In any case, polls is not very difficult to understand. We have all seen it. They usually political polls are very common, but the surveys is where you want to know that it is more complicated than polls for sure. So let's return back to the type of data collection methods. Next is um, interviews. So interviews usually, why do we do interviews? Why we don't do surveys? Interviews, obviously, by the nature of it, you can tell that it is more intimate. It's one-on-one, or it is something that talks about either a structured series of questions that you need to get answers for from the interviewee. As an interviewer, you also want to make sure that you make the subject comfortable, and usually the interviews are more on the visual side, that they are videotaped, and so their reactions or the cues you get from the other party, you would you would either add to the question or change the question, or perhaps push the um, push someone to answer certain questions, but phrasing it in a different way. So it is more interactive. There are two kinds of interviews that we do as researchers, especially with professionals, and not talking about political um, point of views. Just as someone who is coming from an industry background, um, for which you would like to collect information on some subject matter. You can either do structured interviews, which means that your questions are pretty much discussed before the interview starts, and the interviewee is already prepared for it. The other ones are in-depth interviews, which means that you start fresh, just asking general questions, then get deeper into certain subjects or areas where you feel that you need answers for, or more elaborate on opinions or professional opinions. Then you will start changing the tone of questions, or you can, you know, uh, uh, you know, uh, put more emphasis on one um, topic than the other. So you start to change that, and that makes it in-depth interviews. Then we've got focus groups. Focus groups usually it is about a subject matter that needs, and that could be either controversial, or it could be perspectives or opinions of multiple people sitting together, but must have some sort of homogeneity or similarities that would allow you to actually involve the entire group into that matter which they're capable of discussing or are qualified to discuss, except that one may have a different opinion than the other person. And therefore, you put those in a focus group to get some solution to a problem. It's usually directed to getting an answer to a situation, or getting an understanding of what the different opinions would bring for your research, as someone who can look at both perspective or multiple perspective and evaluate it. But at the very end, the focus group is generally geared towards giving an answer to a problem. Then we've got document studies. In document studies, we are only talking about the information that is collected through, the books or journals, or journals or books, or some professional articles and things like that. So you do your own research and you get answers from there. So it is typically how we do research work, if the digital media and the books and everything else that is the material for getting the records, including databases, are concerned. So that is all document studies. Example is shown in this. um, you could see that it is talking about document studies. So in the document studies, there is external records that you can look for. Internal records could mean annual reports, budgets, demographic material, and so on. County records as external records. So it's a mix of external and internal records and sources of your information. So this is where the document studies would be a different format of how you collect the information. But when you do that, you have to give citations and cross references, and your sources have to be disclosed. Case studies are part of the ethnographics. Ethnographics is, as I mentioned to you before, you become part of the project, and this project is not finished in one go. It is not the observation, it is not the interview that starts and ends at the same time. But it is a study that requires for you to be part of the project, and that leads you to new theories or new approaches to how you want to, or how you feel that your research is shaping up, based on your own experiences while you become part of that situation or part of that project. So this happens over time, and you basically immerse yourself in that study. Yeah. Um, that's the five of the ways, five or six, basically, six different ways in which we collect information. We've done this. Next is, and by the way, let's just look at the type of questionnaires in the surveys. I just want to finish that too. Where is the surveys? So let me open this as a single page, and I'll do it from the book. Um, So in survey questions, there is close-ended and open-ended questions. So open-ended are the ones that is descriptive. As I told you, we are going to be paying a lot of attention to close-ended questions. Like what could be the different formats in which you're going to design your questionnaire. Now, when you're doing this, you have to know that certain questions, and because it is all planned, it's not like it's randomly done, whatever comes in your mind, you're just going to create a question, and that's not how it's going to flow. You have to base the you have to basically first of all you have to organize the sequence of questions in such a way that it is leading to an answer or giving a solution to something. But at the same time, individual questions need to be identified as having a format as for the answers or the choices that you give, which is basically multiple choices, but those choices have um, to be presented in a certain format. There could be a dichotomous, a Likert scale, semantic differential. These are the naming of the different formats in which the survey questions are posed for the end users. And we are talking about closed-ended questions. That means there is always a choice of answers you're giving. So let's focus on this area and let's see what dichotomous, Likert scale, and semantic differentials are. So the approach to how you're going to pose the questions in these formats is what is described in the, where is it? In the book, not here. Where is my book? There it is. Should be. hmm. So close-ended questions. So there is one type we call dichotomous, which means it is definitive yes or no answer. That means it is either going to be yes or no, or good or bad, or anything that has uh, dichotomous or two answers to a question. Uh, and then we have, this is how we begin the questionnaire. You start with a dichotomous question so that you know that based on yes or no, you can lead rest of the survey questions. Then the multiple choice questions, which is straightforward multiple choice in preparing copy for printer as an example. And take these examples seriously because you probably get only few examples that are mentioned here to get an idea of what type of format you're going to adopt for the nature of the question that is described. In preparing copy for the printer, which method of attaching printed pages to a backing sheet is preferred? Okay. Stapling, taping, gluing, others. Now, when we are collecting this information, remember that this is the unordered question, which questionnaire or nominal questionnaire, which means that it has a uniqueness like stapling is a process, taping is a process, gluing is a process, and it cannot be a number. And therefore, gluing, taping, stapling, and any other that you put in here has a uniqueness of its own. So this is qualitative. And then we get another type, which is rating question, like in situations where you are posing a question, how often do you purchase lunch in the company's cafeteria? Nobody remembers. Like nobody is going to answer like five times, two times, three times. Every day is different. Every need is different every day. So the type of questionnaire you're going to prepare is rating question. Rating perhaps is an important question in this case where you want to see, the you the I guess in this one you are focusing on how many people are utilizing the cafeteria services, for example. So for that type of situation or for that type of answer, you're going to create a rating question like very frequently. And if you want to add to it, give it a little bit more context, you're going to put almost daily, twice a week, and so on and so forth. So this is rating questions. And when in the exams you get questions with these format exhibited as a sample for you to cross-reference it as qualitative or quantitative data collection method, you would obviously say this is qualitative. Um, okay, then you got Likert scale. Let me reduce the. Okay. So Likert scale, as an example, Likert scale question is a leading question. That means by answering one of those questions, which you start with, you would want to expand it further to make it easy for the users to answer. Sometimes Likert scale have to scale. That means it has to expand. Uh, Likert scale is, for example, the primary reason for the current economic situation. You can read this. The legislative executive branch of government is to develop workable federal budget. Agree or disagree. So these could have been easily answered if you agreed or not. But there would be a group of people that would say that they somewhat agree. So because it is not a descriptive question, it is got to have some of these variables to give a sort of an idea or to give a definitive answer mixed together. So the idea part is somewhat agree. Now, when you get somewhat agree, that means people are not sure, right? And you get more of somewhat agree in this question is that most of the people perhaps do not agree, or perhaps they're oblivious about it. They're not, concerned about it, or it may not be as important. So there could be so many ways in which you can interpret the answer. Now, if you want to expand on this and you'd say, overall, do you think trade globalization is good for you as a question? You want to expand it and you want to say disagree, somewhat agree, or somewhat agree. This means somewhat agree or agree. So these are three choices. And then you're going to make it even more subjective by nudging the user to answer it slightly more conveniently by adding to that question, say, consumer like you is good for, is a continuation right here, is good for consumer like you, agree, disagree, somewhat agree. Companies in your country is good for companies in your country, agree, disagree. So you're going to make subsets of it by using the the vertical column by adding a vertical column on the left hand side and making it segmented or dividing the three choices to relate to direct questions like these ones. Okay. So overall, do you think trade globalization is good for you in creating jobs in your country? Agree, somewhat agree, or agree? This is a Likert scale. Semantic differential is another way of putting the questions together. And by the way, whatever we are discussing with the question types or these formats, these are pretty much all that is used in typical surveys. So these are the all the different types of questions, and you can select from these depending on the type of question you're asking. Semantic differential, for example, means that it is more complicated, meaning that you need to have more details on the previous answer that is given, which is not enough, but it can be further, um, it can be further expanded by creating more variables in terms of giving it weightages so that there is more choice. For example, in this one, if it is bad, then how bad is it? Or if it is to be bad, then it has to be the numbers. that would be probably in 1 through 7. 1, 2, and 3 can be bad. 5, 6, and 7 can be good. 7 can be very good, right? 1 can be very bad. 4 can be neutral. So you pick the answers from the numbers that become kind of assistive for answering more complex questions or more personal or sometimes difficult questions for which you want a neutrality of sorts. So you're just going to use number 4 instead of 5, 6, or 7. If you don't want to, if you want to refrain, or you just want to give a middle ballpark opinion. Unimportant, how unimportant, right? Important, then how much important? 7 is the most, 1 is the least. And so this is called semantic differential scale. You can recognize it in the exam by just looking at the pattern or the format that sticks in your mind when you um, sort of understand the semantic differential versus scale. Ranking questions are important sometimes. For example, in this type of questions, just look at the question. You would see that ranking question fits in best. Likert scale can be applied, but ranking is more direct and it makes more sense. It is in situations where you are moving, say, your office somewhere, and there is a selection of cities for the workers to make a choice. And here they are giving options to different venues where, the company is planning to move their office. So for the employees to give their opinion of how many would want to move to Denver or Miami, or what is the first choice or the second choice. You could see if it is Denver is my first choice, my second choice would be Chicago. So I put 1 here and I put 2 here. Then you've got checklist type of questions. Like just mark what you like you're ordering something. So in situations where, the menu is discussed, or certain provisions are to be included in the office, or certain perks needs to be added, you might just give a checklist type of questions. Fill in the blanks, of course, it is more on the open-ended side, but this is more answering straightforward questions. How many children do you have, for instance? This is not open-ended, but this is part of the close-ended question, except that here you would get a number. This looks like a quantitative data collection, okay, and not qualitative. But it can work in both directions. It depends on the question. You know, if you are starting your own research business as an independent researcher, you would be asked to do surveys, and it comes a lot as either part of your data collection method or as a direct assignment given to you. Um, so, it is a good opportunity for someone who is interested in doing professional surveys to learn more about designing your survey questions. We do see a lot of these type of assignments coming to us, or you could say the projects. Uh, some of the projects require for us to do surveys because they want us to do recruitment. Now, here, recruitment means recruitment of subjects, not recruitment in the sense of human resource. Sometimes collecting sample is a problem. And then whoever collects the sample generally ends up doing the surveys also. So these go hand in hand, which means the sample selection, um, subject recruitments, and building surveys. So that becomes a kind of an opportunity if you want to go in this direction. Now, when we are doing observations and when we are doing focus groups, or sometimes you could say that even in document studies, there is a way in which you're going to document your observations or your collection of information. One of the method is called memoing. Memoing or coding. These are the two terminologies used. So I'm going to show you the example of how, and I just, randomly picked it up as something from the internet, but we don't have the image like this in the book. So if you are doing memoing means that you have, let's say, a piece of an excerpt from a book or some topic from the research paper you're exploring, and you want to emphasize or highlight certain information sets that has a direct impact on your research outcome. What you will do is you will highlight that and then you will give it a kind of a code. Code in this sense is not a numeric code, it's just an expression of the objective of the information set that is more like a hashtag or a topic or something that can concisely define or identify with the longer or the detail that is corresponding to it or that is related to it. So, for example, the code means that you are looking for teachers' role influenced by personality. So teachers who influence their pupil by their personality, that is a perceptual based research, and for which you have this as a code or as the text that would connect with the more detailed format, which is the memo side on the left hand side. So if I want an answer to this, or this code would be relating to I am the statement which is highlighted. I am the type of person that if the need comes along, I will find the resource. So this is a statement, and this might have an impact on the subject matter or might be some information that would correspond to the main code or would answer something to do with the code. Here is, like I said, you have to identify the code based on what you are looking for so that you stay on track, and so you would continue with adding more codes or building more codes as you direct the excerpt to expo or to bring about the more detailed text on one side or where it is corresponding to a subject matter. Uh, with this second one, you could see it is saying expose teacher to technology over time. So these are short forms of the more information that is coming out of the detailed text on the memo side. So there is another code that is expressing exposure of teachers to technology over time. So it is basically answering or creating a relationship between more of the information to do uh, with the identifiable objective of your research. Third one, complaining about evaluating software. So this is the third code. When you get done with your research, you can't just make a mix of all of these, or maybe that's too extensive. And therefore, you may want to go further by adding more substance to the code by giving a weightage. For instance, if it is exposes teacher to technology over time, how many times that is mentioned, you can create another code. Then you can create a third column. This is not as elaborate as it like it to be. So you can keep creating columns, and you can keep identifying it with the memo or the more expressive uh, um, you know uh, idea that is highlighted at the same time. You can even give them numbers, like one is for, let's say, this type of answer, second is for this type of answer, and you can keep creating columns and make subsets of it, so that at the end of your collection, information collection, you can see how many times or how much of a weightage is given to a certain subject matter or topic, or an issue that is mentioned, or that has relationship with the rest of the text in the memo side. So multiple columns. And you can see there is more examples in here. Even if you type memoing techniques somewhat, you would see that different people have described it in different ways. Scientific problems or academic research issues or clinical or medical related or legal, they may have different formats of how the observations are collected, either through, like I said, not just observation, but could be even interviews or focus groups and so on, right? Is this making any sense, or is this um, interesting for any one of you, or do you feel that this is the part that you did not sign up for? You didn't look forward to something like this to be part of the CIRS. I'm just putting a direct question just to get some sense of what was your, what is your opinion so far? Anthony,
Yeah, I was gonna wait. I'm always answering. This is
that's
very
the
interesting.
reason I ask you, is because you're more frank about things. You just, I acknowledge your openness and your, clarity of how you feel about things.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah, it's very interesting. Actually,
Romy,
I didn't even think this would be part of it, but yeah, I like it.
this will be part of your research work, something. It's not just about collecting the information and keep looking for the resources for the data. It's more way more than that. That's just the start. Then you have to know what to do with the information. And then if you want to do it as a professional work, then this is expected that this is, at least this is the least that you have to know, or enough that you have to know to create your research reports. Mejdi, how are you doing?
Yes, yes,
You,
good,
you
good.
are awfully quiet, and it's
Uh,
not like you.
uh, I am listening. I am listening. Yeah, hey, it's interesting. I mean, so I said that I am listening. So yeah, I mean,
Hmm.
primary data, but I believe it comes with practice. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it comes with practice, like how to phrase the questions to get good quality answers. So yeah, yeah, good, good.
Yeah, obviously that's the idea, and of course, as I mentioned, it's part of the course, something that you as a researcher you should be able to do,
Sure.
right? So anyway, see how much time we have. My God, this time the flu was not the usual one. And from what they tell me is that since I'm not local here, where I am right now in Turkey, um, there is a it's called Mediterranean flu, which is very different from other types or other strains of flu. And for those that are visiting or not local here, they don't have enough immunity. So they sort of, told me that hang in there and just keep using the antibiotics, make few more trips here, and you will get immune to it. And I said, well, it's not solving my problem. So, and still is like I've had it for almost a week. Um, So I apologize for, not being able to be there to give all the classes because I didn't feel comfortable just putting in 2 hours of talking. I felt like the first attempt I did, I felt like, a nausea of some sort, and my head was blocked. Like I couldn't think clear. So I wasn't prepared. Now I am getting better, and hopefully next week it should all be gone because now the second type of antibiotic seems to be working. So that is the good news. But the bad news is that we have to add a few more classes, which means an additional week that's going to follow with the last week that was coming up, I think next week. We'll have to add another week or two more classes. That's what my assessment is. So that's the bad news. If you can attend, that'll be fine. If not, we just do the recording. But hopefully you will be around. So anyway, so surveys we did, it showed you how the survey question is. The important aspects of what we needed to discuss are complete. Now, I feel that there is only one part which I will try to finish up if I can today. This is going to talk about quantitative analysis. Anyway, two or three definitions also that just popped up. I would also include that in our lecture today. Um, so if you're doing qualitative analysis, there are two types of analysis, generally speaking. I'll just go through the book so that I don't miss out on any of the slides. It'll just keep me on the track now. There is two types of analysis, broadly speaking. Two types of, sorry, there is analytic induction and there is grounded theory. Analytic induction means that something for which you are collecting information which is happening in real time or is something which starts and concludes at the same time. You're doing your surveys, you're starting and concluding at the same time. Data you're examining or some observation you're doing, you're starting making notes and completing at the same time. That is analytic inductions. I don't know why they make it sound so complicated. That's analytic induction. Then we've got grounded theory. Grounded theory means that it has got an ethnographic aspect to it, which means the analytics or analysis of the data is not conclusive in one go, and with the span of time, it gets collected because of the nature of the survey or the nature of your analysis. It needs more time to mature, or one event needs to be followed by another to make it a sequential data collection that follows from one moment in time to another, and that may require, a longer period of time rather than in minutes and hours. It could go for days and months also. So, coming back to um, ethnographics or embedding yourself in a situation which is being observed for a longer period of time, that is a grounded theory. So, analytic induction and grounded theory, two types. The method of collecting the information, there is coding and memoing. I showed you what coding and memoing is. They go hand in hand. This is a set of, it is a method of, because you see, thing is that whenever you're doing observations, collecting information, you can write memos, you can just write notes, but whatever you do, it needs to be, you're not the only one making a decision or giving opinions or sort of making observations based on how you perceive or how you interpret a situation. It needs to be examined by somebody else, and it can go from one layer to another to a management level also. So it needs to have an organization, or it needs to have a methodology that shows or that is expressive enough, and the method of expressing it is acceptable practice. So you have to do memoing and coding to make it an admissible document for it to be to it for it to become part of your data collection method. And that is why coding and memoing is important. Then you can also do integrative diagrams and sessions. You can even create cartoons that, but as long as it is done in a way that it is bringing the idea to, or it is highlighting something that can only be expressed, let's say, in an animated format, you can even do that. I mean, there are situations that would require you to, put some subjects at a certain position that you want to show that this individual was there and this was here and this was, expressing any ideas or anything can have different formations or formats. It can be diagrammatic. It can be, you can create, like I said, animated figures. And so, as long as it is expressive enough and it is done by hand as the information that has the clarity of expressing an idea, you can do that. So integrative diagrams can be part of that observation. Um, then let's look at quantitative data. Now, okay, let me tell you ahead of time, we are not going to learn statistics here. Okay, so that just keep that out of your mind that in the exam you're going to have a question that has to do with statistical inferences or you have to do calculations. None of that is happening. So no need to get scared. Just the concept or just understanding what some of the ideas behind quantitative analysis mean. That's the reason we are going to discuss going further with the methodology in quantitative measurement. Quantitative obviously means that you have the figures or the numbers. There it is. I'm sorry, it becomes a little bit jumpy. Let me see if I can make the whole page come up. So in quantitative data analytics, the basic concept comes from statistical methods. I'm sure you must have learned something about, statistics in your high school days. Um, the and it'll bring back some of the memories. Like in quantitative analysis, we talk about mean, mode, and median. What does that mean? In terms of number, mean means that it is average. Mean is average of something. Mode means the point where the data is organized, and that data means that it can be organized. If it is random numbers, you're going to give it some sense by starting with the lowest number and then ending with the highest number. And then there is a median, is a mid level. We'll just look at these examples, just the conceptual parts. Arithmetics is what is making things confusing for some of you, I know. But let's try to understand it in the easiest way possible. Average, you know what average is. If it is numbers like 6, 4, 5, 4, 8, 3 put together, then the total amount of it divided by the number of these numbers, like there are what, six numbers? Six numbers divided by the sum total of individual numbers would give you an average number. So this is mean. Mean is just average. Nothing complicated about it. Median is somewhat different. So it needs, first of all, to um, organize any type of random numbers. So one of the methods of putting some sense or organization into an unordered number of, let's say, um, example is right here. There could be numbers like 65, 55, all of these in the top row. Um, these are all random numbers. So first we need to organize them. So we start with, let's say, putting the smallest number, which is 14 in the beginning, and then put 92 at the end. Um, and in between numbers are also sequentially placed. So 35 is less than 45, 55 is less than 45. So these are all organized. Now, what we do at times when we are doing sampling, and this sampling uses a lot of approaches with using median and mean and mode as the selection preferences. So let's suppose that there are these number of employees and each of them are given employee number. One has an employee number 14, there could be employee number 35, and so on and so forth. So when you're doing your sampling, you would be asked to justify how you selected that individual or that employee. Name would create a bias, numbers will not. And so this is always preferable when you're doing sampling or selecting samples. Second is that number has to be in certain order for you to justify which number you picked. For example, in this, where we have all these employees, which is what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 employees. Out of these, you have to pick one. How would you pick one, and what could be the rationale? You could say, okay, I just put all the randomized number in the order, and I just picked 3, 4, 5, the sixth number over here. Okay, I did. Oh, this should have been another number. I'm sorry. No, there are two instances of 56s. So if there is, first of all, I started with the wrong example. Let's suppose if it is two numbers of the same, and there could be a problem. So what you do is that you're going to select and you're going to say that I'm going to pick the sixth employee or the sixth number. Let's not even use the employee word. I take that back. Whatever these numbers represent, they have to be um, there have to be a selection of the in terms of the sequence of what number to select out of the whole set of 11 numbers. So I selected the sixth one. So the next selection I would make is another sixth number following after the number 92. So there could be more numbers. So I could be selecting every sixth instance of the number, meaning that the medium would entail that you organize those numbers first, and then you select from that the sequence, the I guess the relative position of that number as a selection of your as your preferred selections. So this is the sixth one. I'll keep using the sixth one. If it was the third number, every third number, I will just pick up 55 here. I'll pick up 1, 2, 3, 56 as the second, 1, 2, 3, 89 as the third. So I will make my third number as my median number. So in a way, in the sampling sense, it is giving some sort of organization to your method of picking or selecting that individual or that position in that sequence. So this is where you're going to apply your median as a preferred way of selection. Mode means that where three variables meet together, or there could be three attributes or three characteristics of something that meet together or meet the requirements. Okay. And because we are talking in the conceptual sense and we are talking about how the mode is identified or defined, you can think of it as an example in this chart. If I can expand it a little bit more, you could see that here the mean, mode, and median. Now, these are examples. Mode, median, and mean are just examples of three randomized variables that eventually come together at a certain point. So, mode can be across of a point of different variables at a certain delta in your graph in terms of how it is explained. It is explained in a graphical sense, but in the real practical way on how mode is identified, it is considered to have attributes or the characteristics that are typically set to make that selection out of that sample. So the mode is the point where those attributes or those characteristics meet, okay, or meet that criteria. And this is the graph that is showing that all mode, median, and mean, they are hitting at this point, which in the graphs you could see is this area, or the readings on x-axis, the y-axis, and the x-axis meet at this point, or the highest delta before it can go down or go up. I don't want to make it a mathematical complication, but it's the reason why this chart is here is to show you that all these 3 points meet together over here, and therefore it is qualified uh, to be a number that you can safely say that you made a selection based on mode, or the mode was the method you adopted. At the top over here, there's the median, a method that you have adopted. And then you can also use averages depending on what type of selection you are making. Now, the other terms is what we call in the analytical calculations measures of variability or deviations. I'm sure you can recall, standard deviation in statistics, if you have learned that. What deviation means is moving away from a point which is a fixed point. Anything that is considered a fixed point is also considered a referential point from which you can measure a deviation of something, or which is going to be considered standard, and anything that moving away or is relative to it will have an area that is a gap between that variable and that standard. That standard can be, and shown over here in the chart. You're not going to be asked to do the calculations. Remember that. Um, they will just show you the chart and ask you, what does this mean? Here I'm going to show you the example of standard deviation. Okay. Just look at this chart over here. Okay. Now, in this chart, just pay attention to this area. Think of it as a standard or as an average. Okay. Never mind what is y or what is x or what is going down and what is going up. It's not as relevant. Okay. What is relevant is for you to understand that if this is a standard, it could be a number, a standard, which is what you have fixed as something that will measure anything that is moving away from it or coming closer to it. So if this is the point, and whatever is falling on the right, or all these bars you're seeing on the right hand side of it, is basically telling that so much of a distance is between this bar and or the standard. And I don't know how to do this, but let's suppose this is the deviation. Okay. Deviation here means if this one is the standard, which is the mean, then the bar on the extreme right of it is a deviation from the standard, and the distance between this bar in the middle and the one on the extreme right can be 1, 2, and 3 bars in between. Okay. So between the bar that I'm pointing to on the extreme right is variable, or is something that is deviating from a standard, which is this bar, and whatever the distance that you're calculating, which is now only these three bars in between the one that you're measuring and the one that you're measuring with. So these three bars in between are the deviations or dispersions, or this is where the deviation can be measured in terms of percentages. Okay. And you can use anything. You can use percentages, you can use numbers, anything. But deviation is whatever is moving away from a fixed target. Okay. And so you can measure it. If it is coming on the right hand side, it is plus three bars on the right, or percentage, so much percentage of angle difference, or whichever number you want to give it. And if it is on the left hand side, then it is a negative deviation. If it is on the right hand side, it is a positive deviation. Majdi, you understand this part? Hmm?
Yeah, yes. Yeah.
All right. So your trouble is over. The most difficult part is finished. So this is all you need to know. Everything else, the word range, the word deviation, all of that is just got a definition to it. But if you understand the concept and you see that I've explained some of the charts here, it'll be easy for you to just read a few lines when the paragraph starts. Usually in the first two, three lines, it defines things for you. Okay? And in the exams, like I said, you won't have to compute anything. They will just give you the charts and they will say, what does this mean? What does this mean? And there will be multiple choices. You will say, okay, this is standard deviation chart. This is, mean. This is median, things like that. Just visually, you have to relate that to the answer of the choices you're given. Now, the next chapter or the last one that we had to do, which should have finished today, because I couldn't take the classes, that is the sampling or the sampling techniques, why we do the samples. That we have to do in the next class because it is a whole, at least it's going to take an hour to finish that. And after we get done with the sampling, we are finishing up the module 2 completely, which is almost like 70% of the course. And so far, starting from, how to build search queries, and up until now, we have just finished up module 2. We will be starting module 3, which is business of research and research in business. And that's going to take two classes. And after that, the last one is internet law and the ethics of internet research. So those would be another two classes. So four classes after this, and then whatever else is left, if there is a need, I'll just do, the week after and finish it. And that's pretty much it. So I think let's finish up today's session. Um, where is Anthony? You're starting to get comfortable. I see where you what you're looking forward. Stretching, yeah,
Yeah,
or
just a little bit.
not.
Spend a lot of time sitting down.
Romy, how about you? Any questions I can answer for you before I conclude our today's session? Thank
Uh,
you, Joanne. Mm. Thank you for your feedback, and I hope to see you next time, everyone.
Thank you.
Take care. Thank you very much for your time. See you again soon. Bye bye.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. Bye bye.
Right.
Bye.